All right, welcome back. I am here again, Sunday, 1 p.m. Like I said before, I enjoy doing these. Today I'm at home. It's not that nice of a weekend. A little chilly out, rainy, but it's kind of nice. So I figured I'd do it outside today. Well, technically in the sunroom right now. And thank you for all the service men and women out there. Good to remember the people that are fighting for this country, defending this country, who did it in the past, who died for this country. So I spent some time this morning just in prayer, sent some messages out to those that I know. Went to Mass this morning, and now I am here with you guys. Going to continue our talks. So the past couple of weeks, I talked about the PEERS framework I use for the needs. PIERS, physical, intellectual, emotional, relational, and spiritual needs. So hopefully you get the idea of how much responsibility a parent has. Or the adults in your life when you were a kid. And if you're an adult now, if you're a parent like I am, then it's good to be aware of this so that we don't unintentionally continue passing off such things as emotional neglect to our children. So hopefully you're paying attention to these videos, getting something out of it. Today's topic is going to be on vulnerability. I'm probably going to say that word a couple of times during this hour talk. And I might fumble over the words. So we'll see. But vulnerability is basically it's emotional openness. So I keep in mind relationships and our emotional health. Those are two main areas that I focus on in regards to marriages and parenting. So vulnerability is being honest with what you need, right? Being able to express to your spouse what's going on with you. Admitting when you're feeling hurt by them or asking for help from someone. Or even just saying things like, I'm scared, I feel rejected right now, I need your support. All of those are forms of emotional honesty with yourself first, and then with the people around you. So vulnerability to me, when I started to learn more about it, I guess my initial reaction was almost like one of like, I don't want to be vulnerable. There's a sense of weakness in a way about it. But it's just an honesty thing. It's just learning to just be honest with what's going on in here. And in fact, the more I practice it, the more I realize the strength behind it. I mean, so many of us are just fear-driven when it comes to emotional honesty, even with a spouse. And so I know for my own sake, it took a lot of courage, pushing past that fear, the uncomfortability, right? My old beliefs of what I thought about being emotionally open. So I'll dive a little more into that as we go. But the problem is vulnerability often became associated with pain. And for some people, this goes all the way back to when they were young, when they were a child. Even being a toddler, right? All those developmental stages I talked about in previous lives, same thing. So much of what we think about, what we believe as adults, my example with vulnerability for me, were formed at some point in the past. So maybe you were crying as a kid. Maybe you're frustrated. Maybe you have kids and you could see this as your parenting. Maybe your kid is overwhelmed or having a hard time, maybe having a meltdown. And instead of soothing our children, comforting them, nurturing them, emotionally attending to them, right? We get annoyed. We can't stand it. Maybe we criticize them. Maybe we use sarcasm, kind of make fun of them a little bit. We shame them. Emotional neglect them without realizing it. What I mean with emotional neglect, just to be very clear, let's say your kid had a toy that they loved and the toy broke and they came to you and they said, my toy broke. And we said, that's okay. You have other toys. That's emotional neglect, right? Not just the one time, but if we do that as parents over and over and over and over and over again, right? And the child starts crying, but I love that toy, right? That's my favorite toy. And the parent says, it's not a big deal. I'll buy you a new one right now. And the kid's all upset, and the parents getting more frustrated because in the parents' mind, they're logical. They understand what they are talking about. The kid is emotional. They're in their world of being hurt because their favorite toy is broken, not working. And here we are just oblivious to any of that. And so the child, not, thoughtfully, because they're still young, but their system is picking up on, this is not getting me anywhere, talking to this person. I came to my parent here for that emotional safety, and I'm not getting that. In fact, I almost feel blamed in a way that I'm reacting like this. I'm making too much of a big deal out of it. So that's emotional neglect without realizing it. I did it all the time. I never knew that was emotional neglect. And when I work with clients and stuff, I talk to them about it, and their eyes just pop out like, wait, what? That's considered neglectful? Because, there's this stuff, somebody hopefully has to teach you this. Anyway, maybe you had emotions as a kid and they were mocked. Maybe your parents were emotionally immature people. I mean, I could do a whole another talk on that. But unless vulnerability was modeled for you growing up, emotional openness is going to feel pretty terrifying. That's why it's important, if we are parents, to be doing this work. So if you're somebody where vulnerability, right away you have like a belief or a thought that wants to back you away from it, it's possible that you have some pain around it growing up. Your nervous system learned, we don't go there. Right? You're susceptible to getting taken advantage of. So you're not going to go down that road. And this vulnerability stuff just shows up differently for different people. A lot of women struggle to connect with their anger. Some do a decent job with it. But in my experience, some learned that showing anger it's unattractive. It's not very ladylike. But we're human. Men, hard time crying, right? Being upset, feeling hurt. And we connect that to messages we received as young kids. And I hear it all the time with dads. Right? A daughter falls off a bike, mom and dad run over. You okay? You all right? Everything okay? and I'm not saying this is you, in general, a son falls off a bike, maybe mom wants to run over, maybe dad's telling her, like, he'll bounce back, you know? Don't go pamper him, right? They'll make him soft, make him weak, right? He's got to learn to toughen up. He's 7 now. It's crazy, the things we believe and tell ourselves. You know, toughen up a 5-year-old. It's wild. I've been there though. You know, the whole handle it yourself, the whole, you know, be strong, and I mean, you're just setting these young boys up to just run for the bottle. run to soothe themselves. You know, I don't know what happened. He was a good kid. He just, you know, now he's just a raging alcoholic, and he treats people badly, and, you know, drug addict, and doing all these horrible things. So, you know, it's not to take responsibility away from people, but we, sometimes we've had help, you know, with forming beliefs. So, and what I've learned is, because of this, many of us have these protective parts that step in as we get older, because we don't want to be taken advantage of, especially if you grew up in a tough neighborhood. You know, I don't know where you guys grew up. I grew up in the Bronx, and I was not considered one of the tough guys, but I grew up with a whole lot of them. And I look back now and I see how all of us were in protective parts, how we tried to keep people at bay to not harm us, which has its benefits, that's for sure. But anyway, a couple of examples of how we did that was anger. That's a big one with guys now. A lot of anger. Defensiveness. Shutting down, overthinking, staying very logical, not really tapping into the emotion arena, just staying up here and, you know, thinking about everything. People pleasing, perfectionism, control. I always say control is a huge one. Those protective parts come in. Alcohol, big one. Staying busy, staying distracted. And what makes this all difficult is some survival strategies actually help us function in life. So some of the examples I just said help us out, like perfectionism could get you to be admired by people. Maybe you get a job or get a promotion because of your perfectionism. Maybe people in your household benefit from your perfectionism. Maybe people notice you because of it. People pleasing, I mean, who doesn't want to be around nice people? There's a difference between people pleasing and pleasing people. And that's the confusing thing. People pleasing is, you know, we put ourselves at the end of the line. And it's not because we're these, well, we believe we're these, you know, genuinely kind-hearted people. And maybe there's some truth in that. But really, it's more about out of fear. I don't want to disturb people. I don't want to upset people. I don't want people, you know, ruining my peace of mind. So we play the game of trying to make sure everybody else is happy, even though sometimes we're not. But staying busy, you know, staying at work, working late hours, working hard, working overtime. Staying busy in the gym, working out, exercise. I mean, this could all be taken in place of, you know, tapping into what's going on for us emotionally, any type of vulnerability. And not only that, but it's harder to see, right? Because it's like, I work out. How's that problematic? I'm in great shape. People admire, you know, my body or how I look, or ask me questions. You know, they say I'm dedicated, right? I'm very disciplined. So there are ways. It's not just the raging alcoholic that, you know, people look, you know, that's the very obvious one. There are other ways that we are still living our survival patterns out without really understanding, because we actually, and the people around us maybe get some benefit out of it. Anger often protects us against feeling powerless. So the more anger I see in somebody, the more I wonder about their past and how powerless they felt in maybe their family dynamic, or maybe, you know, with kids in the neighborhood. And, you know, they learn to make sure to keep people at a distance, and they used anger to do that. So anger, again, is good protection. Now, I never tell people to get rid of anger. That's not what we want to do. I think anger can be beneficial. It's just how we process anger and how we, you know, use it moving forward, right? Because you want to have a healthy fight response. If somebody crosses your boundaries, it's okay to get angry and frustrated. We're not trying to be, you know, I shouldn't get angry right now. It's like, no, right? Somebody is potentially harming you. You want to get angry about it, right? That's your system's way of saying people are crossing boundaries. I don't like this. And the more type of work you get into with this, sometimes we know that that's happening inside of us, but we push it down. Being defensive, when I see people in defensive mode, I know that they're carrying a lot of shame. The more you attack, let's say, the more you attack your spouse, you blame them, you knock them, you criticize them, or the more you're on the defensive, the more I know that there are deeper feelings going on inside of you that you might not even be aware of. So basically, I watch everything on the surface. I watch how people function, especially clients of mine that come in, and I just take note. And so as the sessions and the weeks and months unfold, I start to connect a lot of this with them. And I just had one the other day, and it was, it's so powerful, and I loved it. That this person was like, wow, I see. This is making sense. And that's a beautiful thing. Because I know for me, that started to really become such a help in my marriage and how I showed up as a parent. Control, right? Everybody always looks at the alcoholic or the drug addict. Oh, they're you know, and I get it. But a controlling person is not healthy. They're very challenging to be around themselves. And again, I could deal with this with marriages, right? One spouse is focused on the other's drinking with little attention paid to their control issues. I mean, control is very similar to addiction. Some might even call it an addiction. And control often protects fear. So when I see somebody that's very controlling, I just know that they are very fear-based. And that's the only way that helps them kind of, you know, alleviate all the fear that they carry. Shutting down, once again, if we ever shut down, that's just, we're overwhelmed. What's going on in here? We can't take anymore. So we just shut it down. Maybe we stop talking. Maybe we, you know, walk out the door, whatever it is. A lot of behaviors that look unhealthy, such as the ones I described, are actually protective strategies. And a lot of times people don't realize that these protective parts, because they don't really understand parts language, which I totally get. They just see them as thoughts. So I always tell people, like, if you can relate more to seeing it as just a thought instead of like a part of you, that's totally fine. And protector parts are survival responses that we developed to try to protect ourselves from pain, rejection. And I talk about my 7 core wounds, you know, powerlessness, hopelessness, fear, shame, and you know, that anger protector part comes up. to try to help us out. So to try to help you guys just get an understanding of parts and how they try to help our system out and what I'm actually talking about, because I understand it could be new language. I know it was for me when I started. So a lot of times I'll just have people just think about their thoughts. So an angry protector part might be saying, right, if you have my thought that's like, forget them. You know, I'm sick of this. I am sick of all of this. You know what? Not for nothing, but they should know better. Right? That's an angry protector part. That's how it comes out. That could be a thought. It could be us verbally saying it. But that part is usually, once again, protecting something underneath, right? So in the moment, we think, I'm sick of them, right? We think they should know better. Forget them. I'm over it, right? That's, when I hear that, and many more like it, I know that they're in a part. And I know there's a lot more going on underneath the surface. My job is to help guide them, and be along with them while they do that. A defensive protector part, that's another part. You might have a thought that's not what I meant. Or you're misunderstanding me. That's a defensive part. I didn't do anything wrong. That part may be protecting against shame. Shutting down protector part. You might have a thought, or maybe you verbally say, you know what? I'm done talking about this. That's shutting down. Leave me alone right now. That's shutting down. Right? You know what? I don't want to deal with this. That's shutting down. All of that is a survival pattern, right? You're in a protector part when you're thinking and behaving like that. And that part could be protecting you from feeling overwhelmed, or maybe some fear there. Control, another one, right? If I stay in control, I won't get hurt. People pleasing, similar mentality. Just keep everybody happy. Don't upset anybody. That's the real reasoning behind being a people pleaser. And that part may be protecting against a core wound of rejection or abandonment. You could even have a spiritual protector part. That was something that really was something I didn't know about, or how you can use spirituality to protect yourself. Sometimes spirituality or recovery language, positivity, helping other people, always trying to do the right thing, they can become ways to avoid what's actually happening emotionally inside of us. Again, think about how confusing that is. It's like, what do you mean I'm avoiding what's going on in me? I'm helping all these people get sober. And what do you mean I'm avoiding what's happening emotionally? I try to live life according to spiritual principles. And, I do certain things throughout my day. So even that spiritual protector part, we might not even realize we're in it. Some other thoughts or things, a spiritual part I've heard before is, I just need to pray about it. Now, all of these things are good, but interesting to learn that there might be a little bit more, right? For some, for some, if we say, I'm just going to go to prayer, that could be a way of saying, I'm not going in here. Hey, listen, everything happens for a reason. Again, I don't want to deal with emotions. Man, I should be over this by now. Why am I so angry? Where am I falling short in my recovery, my program? I shouldn't be angry like this. What am I not doing? You know what it is? I just need to stay positive. That's my thing. I just got to stay positive. All of these thoughts and ways of living could be preventing us from really checking in with what's going on in here. And again, none of those things are bad by themselves. I practice a lot of them. But we just have to be careful that we're not avoiding what's happening inside of us. And sometimes a part of us uses spirituality really to avoid grief. And I think many of us walking around with a lot of issues still, I would tie it back to unresolved grief. And grief meaning loss in our life. Not just a physical loss or the death of someone, but when you start learning about what you should have received, and I tried to touch on that with my past videos on needs, what you should have received as a child, and you didn't on a consistent basis, there's loss there. And we store that grief, and it doesn't go anywhere. In fact, it can actually potentially lead to other disordered or distorted ways of thinking and behaving. Spirituality, we can try to avoid our anger, our fear, any type of emotional pain, especially vulnerability. And that's interesting. I know it was for me. I learned that myself. I became very spiritually knowledgeable, and it helped, especially when you're talking. But I still was emotionally guarded, which doesn't help when you're married and being a parent. I know for me personally, there were times I focused on, just helping others, showing up for others, while still avoiding the deeper emotional honesty. Sometimes spirituality definitely helped me grow, and sometimes a part of me used spirituality to hide. I didn't even know I was doing that. Some protector parts would rather sound spiritually strong than look emotionally vulnerable. Again, if our system is not prepared for vulnerability, we're not going to be able to go there. So in the work I do, it all starts with building safety in our own system first. And I do that through inner child work and parts work and something called reparenting. Real spiritual growth should increase our emotional honesty, humility, our emotional openness, especially with loved ones, trying to build that deeper connection with them. That goes a long way. I can't tell you how many times vulnerability would have helped me out in building that honesty and deeper connection with my wife, but I didn't do it at times. And I didn't even realize. I just would chalk it up to like my personality, just the way I am, using all those defensive, protective parts that I had. Instead of just going to my wife and saying, hey, I feel hurt right now. I don't know what's going to happen. Nervous to do that. I feel insecure, right? I feel disconnected from you lately. That carries a lot of fear. And again, depending on what you went through in your past, this could really be very difficult stuff. Not everybody can do this with their spouse. And so a lot of times what I see and what I saw with myself is, shutting down and getting defensive, becoming irritated. And at the time, it's easy to really put the focus on your spouse. My wife in my case, she just, she doesn't understand me. And I don't understand me. I didn't even know I was living in these survival patterns and out of these protective parts at all. But that's it. That's really what I'm doing. I'm protecting myself from vulnerability. And that protection is creating a lot of emotional distance, which, year after year after year starts to play out in a relationship. So I think a lot of people understand this. That's what, the person's emotionally unavailable. Like, that's it. Not necessarily They don't like you, or they don't love you anymore, or they don't care. But vulnerability for them doesn't feel safe. Let's say they don't feel safe becoming emotionally vulnerable, or it triggers them when you become vulnerable. So that's the other thing. For years, alcohol helped me function in life. I didn't have to dive into my feelings and my emotional world. But, that eventually wasn't the way I wanted to continue to live my life. And even after being sober 10 plus years, many of the survival patterns I had were still very much there. Defensiveness, shutting down, avoidance, control, all those things are very much right there. I just, like many people I've come across with 30, 40 plus years in sobriety, 60, 70 something years old, learning this stuff now. So, we're learning now more and more that the alcohol can stop. Maybe you even have some spiritual program in your life, but being something like vulnerable in front of your spouse is still, we're not ready for it yet. And that's what we need to build, the deeper connection. We have to break through that fear. All of this actually shows up in our parenting too. Children need emotional presence. Dr. Lindsay Gibson talks about emotionally mature parenting. She's written a book in the past. She's got another one coming out. Her previous one is, for me, it's very truthful, and it'll open you up. Sometimes parents become reactive because vulnerability feels uncomfortable for them too. Maybe they grew up where being vulnerable was not the route you went. But because of that, when they have their own kids, it makes them very uncomfortable. Something triggers them. Something's not right when they're even their own child. Maybe they also grew up in homes where emotions were ridiculed or dismissed, or our parents went through this stuff as well. And parents can become really frustrated with parts of their children because they have their own unresolved, healing that they need to go through. And children, our kids, trigger us, trigger our old wounds. And this is tough because as parents, it's like, I'm doing everything I can, I'm a good parent, right? Don't be trying to say I'm a bad parent. Right? You can get very defensive. This stuff that I dive into and talk about is very sensitive. But it still needs to be talked about because that's where the change comes from. I've come across many parents that are falling into these traps. They absolutely love their children. I included myself in here. But as much as parents love their children, as much as they're doing all these other things right, when something old gets triggered in them, everything's out the window, right? They go right into their survival mode. And quite frankly, that's often where most of the damage can get done. So, all week long, you're doing these great things as a parent, and then your child triggers you, and you react. And damage gets done in those reactions. As an adult, we kind of let ourselves off the hook sometimes. They know where I'm coming from. But we never know how deep it runs inside their system. A child's emotions can unconsciously trigger the parent's own unresolved emotions. A lot of parents were never taught how to sit with their emotions, so they struggle when their children start showing theirs. Children learn emotional safety from how parents respond to their emotions, not just from what parents say. It's a training ground, the home you grow up in. And that's it. You're being, trained in a way and taught on how to tap into your emotions and be okay with that. And it's up to us as parents to allow the full range of emotions with our children instead of punishing them. I mean, think about the last time that you got angry, that you got defensive, that you wanted to just, emotionally just shut it down. Think to yourself, what happened? What happened? This is the story part that we're very familiar with. Many of us are good going into the story part of what happened and why we got angry, defensive. And many of us tend to stop in the story. We just get wrapped up in the anger. But what did you feel underneath the anger? If you can't see past your anger yet, that's okay. That's why getting help is important. But did you feel hurt, fear, rejection, embarrassment, shame? Now picture yourself being vulnerable in that moment. Some of you might even be like, get out of here. I'm not doing that. Right? What comes up inside of you? You have thoughts like that? I just want to take you right away from that vulnerability. I mean, this is where our protective parts really show up, because many parts of us absolutely do not want vulnerability. Right? If we can stay on our angry part, there's some sense of control. There's some sense of strength. If I move past that angry part, I'm tapping into emotions. And some of us, we're terrified of doing that. So a protective part would rather keep you guarded, even with people you love, and disconnected, than risk any type of emotional upset, uncomfortability. Right? If you're healing, if me and you are working together, over time, eventually healing looks like, all right, I feel safe with this person in this moment right now. I can share what's going on with me. This is a place where vulnerability can bring connection. I can express my hurt right here, right now. See, stay in the angry part, there's strength, control. I feel powerful. But if I drop that and I step into vulnerability and I say, I feel really hurt by what happened, by what you said, by what you did. I feel embarrassed. That's a different type of strength. That's a courage many of us don't have, to be honest. And I'm still working on that. One thing people don't talk enough about is emotional safety. How can you be married to somebody 30, 40 years? And we go, yeah, it's great. And sometimes they don't even feel emotionally safe with each other. See, people will open up emotionally, especially with a spouse, when they feel emotionally safe. Otherwise, they have to go into their survival pattern. They don't trust their spouse. Right? They're taking their heart, they're going to put it in your hands, and if you keep burning them, they're going to guard their heart. They're always going to feel threatened. Right? And then people walk around being like, this spouse here, this and that, and, this. Meanwhile, they're playing a part. So once again, I just want to say that everything I talk about, there is no perfectionism here. That's why I include myself when I share this stuff. I'm still very much a work in progress. I'm still reactive at times. So this is not me telling anybody. I do like talking about this stuff, but one of the big reasons why I enjoy doing this is because I plan ahead for these talks. And I'm learning while I'm doing it and trying to practice it with my wife and my son. Actually, the other day, my wife we were talking, and we've been doing a really good job at having these really deep emotional talks the past couple of years. It's been nice, and she said obviously that one of the biggest changes for me was getting help and starting to get sober, and I definitely started to change. I mean, it's life-saving. So I definitely suggest to people to step into recovery and find the help that they need there. But she actually said that over the years, even though I got better and a lot of the things I described before, and I learned some spirituality and things like that, she said it wasn't until the past couple of years that she felt that almost like real healing within me started to take place when I started getting into inner child work, and then that eventually led me into doing parts work, which I still do. And that just reaffirms that I just need to continue to do this, especially wanting to share this with others. So emotional safety, right? You want to feel heard by your spouse. You want to feel respected. And this is what my wife meant with my change over the past couple of years, even well into sobriety. Feeling emotionally accepted for who you are, feeling like your emotions matter to your spouse, feeling like you can be honest without being, attacked or attacked or blamed, right? Or somebody holding it against you, right? It's like you got vulnerable with them. Now they take that information because they're emotionally immature, and then they wait for their opportunity, and then they use it against you. That's somebody that's an immature person, right? So hopefully you're working with somebody because there are boundaries there that need to be set. So I am not saying in this talk that you need to run out there and start this just sharing to the world. No, this is where boundaries come into place here. And they go a long way. And a lot of couples I see over the years are stuck in protection mode. Both couples, both people are stuck. One attacks, the other shuts down. One criticizes, the other gets defensive. One withdraws, the other chases after him. So interesting how so many of our survival patterns in marriages have such similarities. And underneath all of that, when I see that in front of me, I just see both people that are protecting. They're protecting themselves in deeper pain. Especially when you start seeing that within yourself. And then it's like, wow, maybe my spouse is protecting themselves too from abandonment, from rejection. And that's why they're acting like this to me. Opens the door to a lot of compassion. One thing that helped me tremendously in my marriage was learning that vulnerability needed to be handled carefully. My wife responding with sensitivity to me, with patience, with emotional safety, that really helped me slowly open up more and more. I had a really hard time with vulnerability, even with my wife, and it's not just her. It just comes from in me, and I had to practice it. I had to even get vulnerable and say, I'm really nervous right now talking about this. Like I'm nervous. In fact, my wife would actually ask me, because some of you might think this is crazy, but I would physically shake. Almost like, when you're cold and you're like shaking. I would do that in certain conversations, physically shake. And my nervous system was nerved out. And, hopefully you have a decent spouse that sees you in that vulnerable state. And and doesn't attack you, doesn't criticize you in those moments, doesn't blame you, doesn't put their anger on you, and allows you to just keep stepping into that. More and more, I just kept opening that door to vulnerability. And because of that, we both started to create emotional safety together. So one thing I want to share, and I said it before, but vulnerability does not mean run around and just share your deepest emotions with anybody and everybody. Please don't do that. It requires a lot of wisdom, actually, on who you want to be vulnerable with. And it also requires boundaries for you, for your safety. Healing is, not oversharing everything. It's more about using vulnerability as a strength and to develop a deeper connection with your spouse and with your children. And that goes a long way. But again, you got to make sure that you are putting your heart into someone's hands that's mature enough to handle it. And if not, hopefully you're working with somebody. There are ways to work with that. So that you're not just suppressing everything. I'll tell you one thing though, becoming more emotionally vulnerable with my wife and vice versa, and us showing that to our son, is I feel really good about the example the past couple of years that we are setting for our son when it comes to that. Again, it's a training ground where our children learn, how do you handle stress? I see mom really stressed out over there. Oh, look, dad came in and asked, hey, I see you stressed. Can I help out in any way? And they were just yelling at each other. They were very frustrated with each other. But now I see them talking and trying to understand each other's point of view. Now I see them hugging it out. Kids pick up on all of that. So yeah, it goes a long way, not just for us. And that's something else that I learned too. If you go into therapy or coaching, I know a lot of times we're doing it for ourselves, even in sobriety. But truthfully, right, you're getting built up to go out and make a change in your family. You're getting built up in a way to go out and make a change in your community, in your neighborhood. So while many of us start the process out thinking it's about me and my problems and fix me and it's all them and give me an answer, really what we're doing is we're just trying to build you, trying to help you become this healthier version so that you can now go out into the world and be that example and that love for other people. So I actually enjoy that. That's a big it's like a perspective shift when you go from saying, I need help, to being like, wow, I'm doing this for a bigger purpose. It's almost like I'm being pulled into this, even though it's considered suffering and you're struggling. But I'm starting to heal and I'm coming out the other end. And now I want to be there for other people in a way that I never was before. And there's a lot of maturity when you start showing up in life like that. So what does healing look like? What do clients of mine start to expect as time goes on? Is they start to become more emotionally honest. They actually know what's going on in here. And then we talk a lot about needs, so they they start to learn to express what they need, right? I'm nervous, physically shaking to talk about something with my wife. I could just share with them instead of getting angry. Look what you're doing to me. Look what's happening to me. Or just shutting down, right? I'm not talking about this anymore. It's, wow, I'm really reacting to this conversation right now. I'm like, I think it's kicking up a lot of fear in my system right now. I just wanted to give you a heads up on that. So just be mindful, as we continue to talk about this. I'm not going anywhere. We're gonna have this conversation. But I think what I need right now is for you just to be a little sensitive to that. That's, I always was like, oh, what kind of man am I, right? Like, what am I doing? And then my wife, over the years, she starts telling me, like, she's like, I've been waiting for 16 years for this, Man, it's like, I've been waiting for you to be more human and voice to me. Tell me what you need. I'm here. I'm your wife. I want to step into this. Just baffled. It's like, really? Stepping into this is making me seem more masculine in your eyes? Like, what? How come nobody's, maybe they were telling me this 30 years ago. Who knows? But a big part of healing is building that capacity for discomfort, because this, doing this stuff for, when you're nervous, when you're scared, when you're terrified, that it can trigger on some old wounds. It's not easy. So we start building that tolerance a little bit. We build a self-awareness. There's no doubt about that. And like I said, that self-awareness goes a long way for us. But it also goes a long way in interacting with our loved ones. We learn how to emotionally regulate so we're not as reactive. Sometimes I fall short in that. I'm human. It happens. Setting boundaries and staying emotionally present is very important. And, it's interesting because it's a couple of words. Staying emotionally present. It sounds so easy. And the more I've been practicing that over the years, staying emotionally present, internally, man, what happens in here is it's magnificent in a way, because I'm trying to stay emotionally present, and I just have these thoughts in my protective parts that they're trying to bring me down all these other roads. Start to become aware of that. It's like, wow. So with all of this said, even me falling short, try not to shame yourself. Many of us dealing with, tough issues from the past. We do carry a lot of shame. So keep that in mind. At the end of the day, I always like to say healing is taking responsibility. Okay, we have a survival pattern. Okay, we were hurt or wounded in our past. Okay, but be very careful not to go into the victim mentality, because we can try to garner a lot of sympathy and fall into the self-pity route, and that can lead us down a whole nother road. So we still have to take responsibility for how we show up. And that's why I said healing, reaching out to somebody, doing this work, it does take a lot of strength. It takes a ton of courage. So anyway, 5 minutes left, guys. Thanks for jumping on. Any questions or anything, you can, type in. All right, I'm going to sign off. If any of my talks resonate, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be back again next Sunday, 1 o'clock. I'll jump on here. All right. Have a good rest of the weekend.